So another thing that I think is important for the students is that they know what the questions are going to be asking them to do. So one of the things that we've been talking about the entire year with our students is that this course has two sort of components that are simultaneously being taught and practiced. And one of those is content, but the other one is science practice skills. And so I think it's important for the students to know ahead of time what type of science practice skills they're going to be asked to demonstrate on these questions. So the second half of the exam, after they finish with the multiple choice, there's a break, and then this part begins. These are all free response questions, and there will be 6 free response questions that they can expect. The first 2 free response questions are long free response questions. Each one of these is going to be worth 8, 9, or 10 points. And both of those questions are going to focus on analyzing an experimental data. So we'll talk more about that in a second, but I think it's important for the students to know that. The data that's going to be included in these 2 long free response questions, like Jim said, is going to be from someone's actual research. It's not likely to be information that they've seen before or a lab that they have seen before. So students should expect to need to read through that background information to kind of orient themselves to what is being asked. Then there are 4 short free response questions, and they cover the following topics, always in this order. Question number 3 is going to be about scientific investigation. Question number 4 is going to be about conceptual analysis. 5 is analysis of a model or visual representation, and 6 is analysis of data. And they also have 90 minutes to answer the FRQ section, and that also counts for 50% of their raw score.
And I want to emphasize that, both long questions were the process of science. One addition there is one of those, question 2 will be dealing with the graph every time. There's no excuse to, I tell my students, there's no excuse to miss the points on the graph. Go over it, go over it, go over it. What the points often are. The short answers, 2 or 3 of those also deal with the process of science. And so that is a huge emphasis when we review, is when we're doing FRQs or we're doing lab sets in multiple choice questions, they're focusing on those type of questions.
That's a really good point, Jim. And I also emphasize to my students, like Jim was saying, there's no excuse for you guys, hey students, missing certain types of questions. So we really practice throughout the year, but especially in some review. Can you identify the dependent variable in this investigation? Can you identify the independent variable? What is the role of the control? Why has the experimenter chosen this particular control? These are really common questions that students are going to see over and over and over again in these types of long, especially the long free response questions. In fact, the students should expect them. And these are opportunities for the student to earn what I would call a really quick point. So if the student is asked, hey, you can earn a point for identifying the dependent variable, that's a really short answer for earning a point. So there is no excuse for the students to miss those. Obviously, we can't control what the students are writing, but there's really no excuse for students missing those kinds of questions. They should be able to earn those points.
Agreed. Some general advice before we continue with the strategy is, if they know, it doesn't matter what they write in, it's going to be graded. In all my years, I've never seen one not graded because of what it was written with. But black ink, just, the wear and tear of shipping and scanning, and it's just better increases the chance that they'll be able to read what the student wants them to read. We do encourage labeling them. And just keep in mind a couple things that if they write, they have to write on the lined paper. They write somewhere else, it's not graded. If they make a picture, the picture itself or diagram or figure is not graded unless it's explained and discussed on the lined. And then another example, if the question asks to do 2 things and you do 3, the first 2 are graded. So you could get it correct, the student could get it correct, incorrect, and the third one correct. They're going to get 1 out of 2. So then they don't have to go erase or anything. They can just cross out what they did not intend. Go ahead, next slide.
Well, I also wanted to add that something that the students probably do not know unless you tell them is the same reader or grader is not grading all of their free response questions. So the person who is reading through and putting a score down for their first free response question is probably not the same person who is doing that for their second free response question. And so it is important to follow the directions that Jim was talking about and make sure they're writing on the lines and make sure they're answering the question in the location where it is supposed to be answered. That gives the highest opportunity for whoever is grading free response question number 3 to find their answer. So if they answer, free response question 3 in the space for free response question 1, it makes it difficult for the person who's grading it to find it. So that's something else that's worth mentioning.
Okay, so obviously no point to earn for answers left blank. So encourage them. You can't get negative scores. Points aren't taken off. So you only get points for saying correct things. The only time if you get a point, the answer is red and you say red, you get a point, and then you say it's blue, well, then that'll be removed, but you don't get negative. So there's no harm in trying. Read the question, read the question, read the question. Taking some time to get organized, organize your thoughts before writing actually will result in short, concise responses. That helps the grader more simply be able to find where you earn the points. Long ramble may make it difficult to decipher, and oftentimes, ends up the students shooting themselves in the foot by revealing they don't understand. And graders do step back. We're not looking for buzzwords. We're saying, does this student understand? Does the student understand that this, what they're writing is the answer to the question? We're not looking just for buzzwords. I encourage my students answer the question and no more. That rambling takes time, and especially early on in the new exam, the biggest complaint was I didn't have time to finish. Mm-hmm. Well, most of the time, obviously, if they don't understand the content, it takes them longer. But oftentimes, it's just they ramble, and they're wasting time because you don't get any points for, oh wow, that's a really nice answer. So if the question asks for 2 items, only write those 2. And once again, like I said, time management is the key to success.
Yes, just like in part 1 with the multiple choice, the student should have an idea, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, but the student should have an idea of where they should be when. They don't want to get to, 75 minutes in and realize they've only answered to question 2, and they haven't started any of the short free response questions.
So questions 1 and 2 are worth up to 50%. As Paula said earlier, 8, 9, or 10 points. All of questions, all 6 questions, at least on the practice exam, have a multiplier of 1.7-ish. So if you just kind of do the math, you're roughly about 22.5 minutes for the long question, so 45 minutes. So half the time for the first 2, and because they can add up between 16 and 20. 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to add up to 16. So that's about the second half. So just a general idea will help manage time. So Paul already talked about the long questions for what they're going to, and that's straight out of from the College Board. Mm-hmm. Just know the graphing. And when we talk about graphing or the experimental results, what are they doing? They expect data analysis, graphing, error bars, p-values. So what does a low p-value mean? It means, you have less chance of those results happening by happen chance, by randomness. So, make sure your kids know that. Remind students to answer what they know and don't spend too much time initially on items they're less confident about. Rather, mark them and return to them later.
And I have something to add when we're talking about students should expect data analysis, graphing, error bars, etc. One thing that students sometimes do that does not earn a point is what I would call in grading hedging their bets. So if, for example, the students are analyzing data from a graph where there are error bars and the students are asked something about, is there a statistical difference between, category 1 and category 2, and the error bars overlap. A lot of times the students want to say things like, well, category 2 is taller than the line for category 1, but they do overlap. So they really should be precise in their wording. If the error bars overlap, that means one thing. If the error bars don't overlap, it means something else. And they don't need to give a lengthy description of what they see if it doesn't support the error bars overlapping or not.